Hey, it's Tasty Fear here, and today I want to talk about a kind of crazy theory, certainly speculative, but it's talking about the outer gods and how they correlate to space, some symbology related to them that hints at this or is important to kind of understanding how the people in the lands between understand the outer gods, and and then some evidence to kind of back up my theory here that the outer gods are a bunch of cosmic space deities that have like physical distance from the lands between, even though they also want to exert some kind of influence over the lands between. And we're not going to get into motive with this video, more so just understanding how them being space beings relates to the tarnished and the inhabitants of the lands between. Also, as a quick heads up, there will be spoilers ahead, so you've been warned. Okay, so first, I want to just lay out the outer gods that we know about. So there's the Greater Will, obviously in charge at the moment. The Goddess of Rot, or the outer god of Rot, that we know is inhabiting Melania and kind of chose Melania, or chose Melania to be its goddess, kind of how the Greater Will chose Marika to be its goddess. Then there's the Frenzied Flame, the Dark Moon, Ronnie's Dark Moon. We have the Dark Moon ending that kind of shows us that actually has some great dialogue that hints at this physical distance, there being an actual space that is lived in and inhabited by these outer gods. Then we have the Formless Mother and the God of the Fire Giants. And then we have two more outer gods, or at least possible outer gods. I believe that this will bring our total to 8, and that these two are indeed their own separate outer gods, but they're not as talked about, shown. It's just not quite as clear that they exist as we actually see, either we embody the Frenzied Flame, we see Scarlet Rot, how it has an effect on things. It's like visually in the game, we can see the influence of most of these. These last two are talked about a little bit, but aren't quite as explicitly said. So the 7th on our list would be the outer god of the Deathrite birds. Now, the Twin Bird's Kite Shield is where we get the evidence for here. It says, the Twin Bird is said to be the envoy of an outer god and mother of the Death Birds. So that's our main hint at the death, this like death outer god. And we do see, obviously, like the Frenzied Flame has its own kind of fire. The Formless Mother has the blood fire. We also see the Deathrite birds and Ghost Flame. That is its own, that outer god's fire in my theory. Then finally we have the Dragon's outer god, which we learn from the Remembrance of the Dragon Lord, talking about Placidusax. Once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return. So again, just kind of hinted at by an item, not quite as clear as some of the other outer gods. But we're going to run with the theory that there are 8. It doesn't really matter how many there are. The premise of this is that they are space beings, powerful cosmic entities. So, thanks to an incredible video by Quaylog, she kind of covers a lot of great symbology in her episode on Liurnia, and she mentioned the symbology of like the multiple circles around either one central circle or some visual representation of something important. So like maybe the seal of Caria Manor. But we see this a bunch of times, this kind of idea, these circles around something, such as like the Troll's Hammer is a great evidence of this. The Fire Giant's eye, when it opens up, has that one central pupil and then these little circles around it. A bunch of the like seals and symbols of different magic have a certain amount of either stars or circles with stars in them around whatever it's depicting. So like the cuckoo for Raya Lucaria. We also see this on the heads of the Iron Virgins, where it's 4 circles on either side and then one central circle. And then finally, also, we see on the Divine Towers that there are inlays of meteorite around the 2 fingers. So here's our repeating theme of circles around something. And now I want to tie them to my idea that that it's a ancient symbol of the divine, and specifically communing with the outer gods up in space. So first we see with the Troll Hammer. So the item says, mining tool of a stone digger troll used to crack bedrock. Trolls are descended from giants, and these were supposedly once used as a ceremonial smithing tools. In the distant past, smithing was considered divine. Now, it's common in human history to equate smithing and like the creation of things with divinity. So it makes a lot of sense to me that a symbol of communing with the divine, with the small circles kind of representing the outer gods and the circle in the center either representing the person, the tool, or just like the lands between. So to put a symbol of communing with the divine on a tool used to create things is a very human kind of aspect, and I think that's why we see it here. And I also think that's why it specifically says smithing was considered divine. I think it's an important... they don't always put super important things on items, but a lot of times when they choose to give us a little bit of lore on these items, it's worth paying attention to. All right, then we see it again with the Fire Giant, and I'm kind of covering these ones that are very clear to me, and also specifically show the most clear depiction of these circles around something. So for the Fire Giant, we know that the based on lore given to us through different items, that the Fire Giant as their outer god, this Fire Giant outer god, has a unique ability to inhabit and kind of possess its people, the Fire Giants, who are now extinct except for the one that we fight and eventually kill up on the mountaintop of the giants. But when we see, we break the Fire Giant's leg, he pulls it off and he holds it up, holding it up towards the heavens to commune with his outer god, to allow this possession to take place. And so I think that's, again, why when the eye opens, we see this communing symbol on the eye around the pupil. So it's pretty clear when we see, like, this is the most clear depiction of communing with one of these space beings this happening, this symbol appearing immediately in correlation to this. But I also really feel pretty strongly about the Divine Towers, that they are utilized almost as antenna towers for communing with the greater will. So there's a lot of speculation on a couple things about the Divine Towers, like what is the weird material that is on the interior of the Divine Towers. It kind of looks like the meteorite that we've seen. So we see this interesting material on the inside. We're not sure exactly what it is. And once we get to the top, or as we're going to the top, we also see this like white and black substances that are kind of floating just up and down the tower as we ascend or descend. And this is going to tie in towards how the two fingers commune with the greater will, which I'll get into in a minute. But as we once we get to the top, we see around the two fingers, again, these circular meteorite inlays all around the two fingers, maybe being a practical and symbolic act of putting these meteorites in there. Maybe they help with communing this message, or it could do that and also just be symbolically important, as we're kind of saying these circles around something are built into the history of the lands between. So the reason that I think the Divine Towers act as antennas, first off, it just makes sense if you are trying to commune with something up in the heavens, up in space, to have height to sending out those signals and receiving those signals. It makes it easier. That's one of the things that we do in our real life, like the way that we treat signals. We have tall towers. We try and put our certain receiving and sending like satellite dishes high up in high elevation, just due to atmosphere. And so let's go with the idea that they are there to help communicate. You're going to want to put your signal receiver and sender higher up, closer towards where you are communing with. So we have a couple items that hint at this, as well as some dialogue from Enya. So first I want to cover the Cipher Pata and the Coded Sword. So I think the Cipher probably has the more important lore bit here. So let me read that for you. One of the weapons originating from the two fingers. A formless sequence of ciphers comprise its blade, and as such, no shield can repel it. It deals holy damage. The furtive inscription appears to hang in the air, the language of light spoken by the two fingers. So keep that in mind. This is comprised of a bit of light that has a message in it. And you can encode messages in tons of different ways in real life, like the way we do it. And this seems to be the way that the Greater Will sends messages to the two fingers. Now, the Coded Sword also hints at this. Let me read this, and then we'll talk about it. A hidden sword once granted to the tarnished of the Round Table by the two fingers. A formless cipher comprises its blade, which deals holy damage and no shield can repel. Champions would gather at the Round Table in days long past when the two fingers were masters of oration, their flesh yet full of vigor. So the reason that I think that this piece is important as well is it's specifically it reminds us that it is a cipher, and it is a message, and that the Two Fingers would disseminate these messages to the Tarnished directly, and it's on this item that is showing this cipher again. So with those two items, we're kind of gonna run with a theory that these light messages are sent to and from the Two Fingers and the Greater Will. This is how they communicate, and it's related to what Enya tells us. And when I first heard Enya mention this line I'm about to read, I remember I was like, oh, like this is talking about like such a long time. So this happens after the fingers, the Two Fingers in the Round Table hold become still. They point upwards, and Enya talks about how it is communing. The Two Fingers now have to commune with the Greater Will. So let me read her dialogue to us, and then we'll talk about the surprising thing to me. I would be curious if anybody else kind of felt one way, and then after you hear this, if you feel a different way. So Enya tells us that the fingers remain still. Shaken by this turn of events, they are busy consulting the Greater Will. When they are finished, the fingers will once again offer their guidance, but thousands, if not tens of thousands of moons must first pass. No matter for me, but you, how will you ever manage the wait? My oh my. So she's talking about it may be thousands upon thousands of moons before the fingers again offer their guidance. And I was like, okay, well, it makes sense that, however, how will we wait when it's going to be, to me, I just assumed she was talking about thousands of years, like it's going to be an insufferable amount of time, especially with the thought of like destined death maybe coming back into the mix, which eventually does happen, obviously. And then, how would you survive thousands of years? But then I was like, let me just look it up real quick. How long is 1,000 days? And 1,000 days is only 2.7 years, which isn't a short amount of time, but it's certainly a kind of reasonable amount of time. Even if that's 10,000, that's 27 years. That's a lot, but it's something that somebody could live through. It's a chunk of a lifetime, but it's not the many lifetimes that it kind of felt like she was hinting at first. And so this just kind of puts into, I guess, my mind that this idea of the fingers communing, that they're with this, like, these light messages, that it is a distance. It's a certain distance from it. It starts to put numbers to the distance these celestial beings are, these outer gods. It makes them more real and less just kind of like almost an idea as they were, as they are most of the game. Like the idea of the Greater Will having a hand at play here is more tangible once I think we understand these little nuances of, like, coded light is sent to this being, and that takes some time, and it takes some time to come back, but it is a conversation that is had. All right, so that kind of covers what this aspect of the outer gods being real and out there in space. All right, so those are some kind of ideas. The coding kind of up and down the tower, the divine towers, the items that have these frozen messages in light that were the two fingers discussing or conversing with the greater will. And this repeating symbology about these circles around something and how that relates to communing. It's just a thought I had about this cabal of beings in space that are kind of vying and fighting over the lands between. I think it adds a really fun concept to this world as we know it. Almost a little bit more of a visual and physical understanding of the outer gods as opposed to how the influence that we see around something, just to give it a visual aspect. And then finally, I just wanted to throw out the idea that the primeval current, to me, represents space between. For this theory, we see each of the outer gods as some physical, large celestial body. Something, a planet, in the Dark Moon's case, a moon. Whatever they take, they are sentient and physical and powerful. But the primeval current is a little different. And so I'll run through the 3 primeval glintstone sorceries, what they say, and it just kind of I'll lay out the premise that they show different celestial happenings, breaking apart of stars or nebula, something less complete as maybe a moon, a planet, a star, and instead these swaths of space and just things that happen in it. So where the outer gods are related to specifically celestial bodies, the primeval current is the rest of the space between. So here are those items. Comet Azur says, when Azur glimpsed into the primeval current, he saw darkness. He was left both bewitched and fearful of the abyss. So directly just commenting on the space as a large, empty darkness. Now, the Stars of Ruin reads about Lusat. When he glimpsed into the primeval current, he beheld the final moments of a great star cluster, and upon seeing it, he too was broken. So, here we see this great star cluster. Again, not a specific, a moon, a planet, something just singular, but this star cluster that was apparently being destroyed or going through its final phases. And then we have the founding reign of stars. The glimpse of the primeval current that the astrologer saw became real, and the stars amber rained down on this land. And so we see this like nebulous cloud form when we cast this spell, and the it releases a downpour of stars onto the ground. So again, nothing complete as in a planet or a star, but instead this nebula with kind of falling stars as part of it. And so I think all of these combined, they talk about the primeval current. It is all part of the space between, and then the outer gods are the singular entities within this space. Okay, a lot of rambling. I want to talk about Selen last, and then we'll kind of wrap up with a thesis summary. All right, so Selen tells us, glintstone is the amber of the cosmos. Golden amber contains the remnants of ancient life and houses its vitality, while glintstone contains residual life, and thus the vitality of the stars. It should not be forgotten that glintstone sorcery is the study of the stars and the life therein. So Selen kind of separates this idea of the golden amber that we have here in the lands between versus what Glintstone pulls from, which is just the space stuff, right? Anything that we kind of find out in space. That's why the astrologers were so important. That's why they looked up there and developed the Glintstone sorceries. And so I do think that there is, ties together one kind of final train of thought on a celestial body having power and importance within this world as we understand it. And that is that there is specifically ancient life here in the world of the lands between, on whatever kind of planet, land it is. And so it makes sense that these outer gods, the way that I see these correlating is that the outer gods are almost jealous. If we pull from what we understand from like certain mythos, the gods oftentimes are jealous of what we have as humans. That's a running trope in a lot of different mythologies. And so we see it here in that the lands between is special inherently. It has ancient life. And perhaps the outer gods are jealous of that, and that's why they want to control it, because life out in the cosmos is either non-existent or residual, whatever that might mean in this case. It's not as important or powerful as the life here in the lands between. And this also mirrors as something that we see as humans when we look out into space and into the cosmos, is we see that we are kind of this beacon of life and the rest looks empty. Now we know that that's almost certainly not true. We just don't have the technology and, ability to go visit every planet, in the universe and find the other ones that have life. But it gives this illusion that we are this beacon of life, and then the rest of space is kind of cold and different. It doesn't have that golden life that we have here. So I just wanted to throw that out there. There is this kind of understanding of our world, and our views in real life are obviously going to be reflected in the media that we create, and in this case, in the games that we love. And so I think that is compelling as a bit of evidence towards this theory that there are space beings in the world of Elden Ring. And I thought it was kind of a fun little thought exercise. So next time I'll probably cover Ronnie and her amber egg finally. It is certainly a much more put together theory, as in there's some more continuity in the thought process. This is a lot of fun, the idea of the symbology for communing with the divine outer gods who have had influence over the land between for a long time. The greater will is just the current kind of most powerful one in that aspect, and that this communing and symbology that's come around it is because these great celestial bodies are fighting up in space over power over the lands between. So thanks for coming on this journey with me. It's been, in my head for a long time, and I think it's will be fun to talk about, and I'm sure that we can all come together and find more correlations between the symbology and space and the outer gods. So I can't wait to catch you in the next video. Until then, bye.